Are live.
Yes,
Here we are.
Back on DJs and for me, Saki, because we have a very special guest on the show.
Get some whiskey for me.
Beer, you know me, always with beer.
Is that Japanese whiskey, Matt?
No, it's Scottish whiskey.
Mo's got a Corona.
Celebrating Corona.
I had the Rona last night. I made some tacos.
There you go.
I had some Rona in my fridge. I was keeping on ice.
Can you do put that? I don't. For me, it's like a. I don't know if it's obviously where you live, Mo and David. It's always summer, but I mean, it doesn't feel right drinking Corona in the winter for some reason.
Yeah.
Well, it's still warm over here. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you guys normally throw a lime in a Corona like what most people do?
Yeah. Line of what?
A lime.
A lime. A lime. Yes, I always put a lime.
Yes.
I'm actually hearing someone talk. Do you guys hear that as well?
Yeah. It's probably Justin.
I think Justin doesn't have his mic muted.
Yeah, he doesn't have his mic muted. It's a rookie mistake. There it is.
There we go.
Well, we should begin the show by wishing our partner in crime, Chris Liebing, a very special happy birthday because it's his birthday today. And that's why he's not on the show, but he may pop in just to say hello. So happy birthday, Chris.
Happy birthday, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
I think he's listening.
Chris.
Sing the song.
Chris is with his kids today, celebrating his birthday. I wonder what he's doing, but I guess I'm assuming it's fun and involves the birthday song, the happy birthday song.
Hopefully.
The song that
I can't remember. How's it go, Ali?
You know, it just kind of begins and you wish it were over before. I mean, like, you know what? The funny thing is, like, everybody I know hates that song, but we all tolerate it, you know?
Yeah.
What other choice do you have?
Nobody wants to be the guy. I think if you're the guy whose birthday it is, you can say, guys, don't sing me the birthday song.
Yeah,
but you know, most people be like, no, you have to. It's you know.
No, I've seen people like say it from the get-go. Like, I know it's my birthday, but please don't sing me that song because it's a horrible song.
All these people.
And then people can't help themselves. They have a few drinks and then they're like, you know, the minute the cake comes out, it's like, happy birthday to you. And all the people that agreed not to sing it, they start singing it.
Yeah, you can't get everyone on board, especially with booze. I think it also has to do with they like to embarrass the birthday person.
Yeah.
You know, you have to sit there. Everyone's looking at you. Everyone's singing at you, and you have to sit there and take it. You're just like, oh God.
I mean, I'm sure, Ali. I'm sure you've had it at in a club situation on your birthday where the crowd have sung "Happy Birthday."
A few times. That's nice.
Oh, that's nice, is it?
Nice.
It's not something I look forward to, but it's not something that you can stop midway or prevent. It's just one of those
things. You can put a sign up saying, you know, or you can tell your manager to speak to the crowd beforehand, say it's Ali's birthday, so just please do not sing that song.
Yeah, right.
But you know, a few thousand or a few hundred people all singing in unison the birthday song to you, and you're in the DJ booth, and then you know, like, you're gonna get right back into your set. That's kind of a nice feeling.
Yeah, I remember we had Hyperactive's 50th birthday, and we brought out a huge cake for him in the middle of his set, and it actually made the crowd get more rowdy, and the vibe got better in the room. Everyone went crazy. So
because the cake came out like unexpected, and it had like sparklers on it, and everyone's like, yeah.
And it was a completely illegal warehouse party, so you know.
Yeah, it added to the fun.
So you added a little bling, a little sparkle to the illegal warehouse party.
Exactly, man.
Yeah, it's like when they bring out those bottles during bottle service with the sparklers. But it was a birthday cake.
Do you guys like? I've always, maybe I asked you this before. Like, do you guys have any pre-show rituals? Like, what do you guys do right up until the time that we start?
In the last few years, especially with the kids, it's been sleep. You know, that's it.
Really? You take a siesta?
Yeah, sleep right until the last minute, and then wake up, grab maybe a Coca-Cola, something from the mini bar, to something to, like, you know, try and wake you up. But there's been numerous times where I've been with the driver going to the gigs where I've been asleep, and it's so weird to go into a club, you know, when you're half asleep and everyone's, of course, spent the whole night out already.
But I'm actually talking about a pre-DJs and Beers show ritual.
Oh,
yeah. I kind of have I wake up
we can talk about the pre-gig ritual as well.
But I usually wake up in the morning. I go for a walk in the park with my son to give my wife a chance to finish her emails. And then as soon as I bring him home, I come straight to the studio, have a big cup of tea, because I'm not a big coffee drinker, and then sit here for 30 minutes waiting for you guys to jump in. That's my ritual.
You don't drink coffee?
I'm not a big coffee drinker.
Oh, man, you're kidding. How do you get through the day?
I don't know. You know, dude, my entire life, I've never really warmed up to the taste of coffee. Wow. I mean, of course, if you give me like a Frappuccino or something, I can tolerate it, but it's just never something that I've really, really liked.
What about like you smoke or no? You don't smoke?
No.
So wait,
not anymore.
When you're in the studio for long periods of time, like, and you want to take a break, what do you look forward to? Like, what's break time? What does that entail? If it doesn't entail smoking, going out for a smoke, or getting a coffee or espresso, what does that entail?
It used to be looking forward to smoking. Now it's finding something to keep me busy, but it's difficult. Definitely. I think I miss that, as a matter of fact, more than anything. Especially this year. Oh man, you're making me shiver.
Hey, what?
No, but usually
just have another sip of that.
Exactly, man.
You'll be fine.
But, hey Mo, I'm curious. Did you already have those Coronas, or did you buy them for the show?
No, I already had them.
You already had them, because I know you don't normally drink beer.
No, I had these from Thanksgiving.
Oh, okay.
And it's early for you guys. I mean, it's noon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you really shouldn't be drinking anything, David.
I mean, this is the only time I drink this early is for the show. Like on a normal day, when I crack my first beer, it's usually like the earliest, maybe 2 or 3 p.m. Okay. But I really don't drink that much. I'll drink like 2 or 3 at the most. 3.
I think the past few shows I've ended up downing like half a bottle of sake. And it's not until we finish the show that my head starts spinning and I realize how much I've drunk.
And wait, Ali, where are you getting the sake from at the moment?
This one, I mean, there's a few. This one was given to me by my friend Taka, who is the chef and owner of a restaurant here called Sun Taka. It's an amazing Japanese restaurant. And he was kind enough I asked him to teach me how to slice fish for sashimi and sushi. Nice. And I have this whetstone for sharpening my knives, and I wanted the right technique for sharpening my knives using that whetstone. So I asked him to come over on Monday, and he was nice enough to come over, and we spent the whole day together. He was teaching me all these, amazing techniques. And he brought me 2 bottles of sake, and this one is it's from Homare. It's a Yamahai Junmai. Junmai means pure rice, and Yamahai is a way of preparing the yeast starter that involves like natural lactic bacteria falling into the tank from, the ambient, from whatever room it's in. from the air. Basically, it drops into the tank, and it produces like a kind of a funkier, gamier sake.
You know what? I'm really curious to try that kind of stuff, because there's a similar process with certain beers where they have like what they call it like a wild yeast or wild fermentation, where just like whatever's in the air will, you know, the bacteria will create what that beer is. And it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean it's a longer starter. I think it's a few weeks longer than other methods. But it's, you know, it's like the equivalent of like biodynamic or natural wines. It produces sake that's just a bit more adventurous on the palate.
That's
Ali, I was going to ask, is the restaurant back open? Where he's working? How's it going in Barcelona?
I mean, I was talking to him about it. Yeah, the restaurants and bars are open, but they're operating at like 30% capacity, which is really bad for them.
And there's no tourists, I guess, are there? I mean, there's no
tourists. You know, Glovo is quite busy with deliveries.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, like, I found out from him, I'm like, are you working with Glovo? And he said no. And I'm like, why? He said, because they take 40 to 45% of the, you know, that whatever people order of the order, which is crazy. They almost take half of the order. So for him, that's not sustainable, you know.
What is that, like an app, like a food delivery?
Yeah, it's kind of like a delivery. It's pretty cool, actually. I use it a lot, but like I had no idea the splits were so bad.
It's also, I mean, there's that whole thing as well. Like I was talking to my friend in Berlin who has a Jamaican restaurant, and there's some foods that travel well and some foods that don't, and some foods that, you know, unless they're kept in the right conditions, I mean, it's impossible to experience the same meal, isn't it?
It's funny you should say that, because my friends at Arigato, which is another restaurant here, are doing, you know, delivery of, I don't think they're using Glovo. They're using like a smaller kind of company. And they're preparing in little packages everything that you need to kind of put your meal together. And then they include directions.
Yeah.
And you kind of play a role in preparing your meal.
Yeah.
Everything is like perfectly organized and bagged. And there's clear directions, and it takes maybe just a couple of minutes to put it together. But funny enough, it hasn't really taken off.
Right.
And order from Glovo or other delivery apps, it could take sometimes an hour for you to get your food. And by the time that it comes, it's like cold and really not appetizing.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, like, he's come up with it. I mean, he's not the only one. There's a lot of people that are doing that sort of thing, but it hasn't really caught on here in Barcelona. Excuse me, I've spilled some sake. I've got to get
already.
And how's the situation in California this week with everything?
Worse. We've had like, man, what is, I can't even remember the count, but like the daily cases here in LA County was like at one point like 7,000.
Wow.
And,
didn't we have the most? I think it was like 10,100 people died today in the U.S. So it's the most deaths ever.
Yeah, like over 3,000, I think. No. Is
it? I think it's like 10. Maybe I heard it wrong. 10,100 or 3,100. I can't remember. I think it's 10,000, which is
deaths.
Insane. Deaths.
Holy shit. Okay. I mean, I haven't been keeping up with it, but Jesus.
Yeah, I've had to turn off the news. It's becoming incredibly depressing, but we're in the middle of a new lockdown, and now we have curfews in place. Not supposed to be outside the house unless it's absolutely high necessity, and it's been quite strange. So
yeah, all the outdoor dining is closed for restaurants and breweries, like takeout only essential shops are open.
And how's it been for like your friends who, like, I mean, I know I know you guys print records, but how's it been in California for the record stores this year? Like, actually, like actually keeping the stores open. Of course, I'm sure that there's online ordering, but Amoeba's shut. I can't imagine it's a very healthy situation.
Yeah, to be honest, I feel bad saying this and actually just saying this out loud, but I haven't really checked up on many of our friends who run local record stores. I know that it's been difficult regardless, pandemic or not, in the last few years, just staying open. And I can imagine, I know that Stellar Remnant is still running, and Mount Analog Record Store just reopened in the middle of the pandemic. I think they were trying to get the store ready before the pandemic began, and then they just kind of are doing appointments and having people coming in for appointments and coming in. And it seems like Dr. Free Clouds is staying above water as well. Have you checked up with him, David?
Yeah, he's doing fine. I went and dropped off some records there like last month. Yeah, he's open and operating. I mean, he's in Orange County, so their restrictions are a bit looser than LA County.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah, people can go in there. There's no, maybe not now, but before there was no capacity limits. But I know in LA, Stellar Remnant, they had like a GoFundMe because they were struggling a little bit, which I think last time I checked, they reached their goal. So hopefully things go well for them. They're located downtown, really good record shop. Those are honestly the only two that I really ever go to.
And they buy all your releases, David? They always stock up on.
Yeah, they always whenever I get a new record, they always tell me to bring some. I mean, I give them to them directly. I was like, I'm in LA. Wouldn't make sense for them to go to a distributor. So I just I'll drop off some copies.
Yeah, in the past, like especially for Mount Analog in the past, whenever I would do a release, I would even just give them exclusive of my releases for like the first 2 months and just have everyone order from them, even if it's international, just to help my local record store.
Yeah.
Just to get everyone to order from one place, and then whatever they couldn't sell, I'll take and then put on Bandcamp or send to distribution or something.
And when did Mount Analog reopen? Like really recent, right?
Yeah, just like in smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, they reopened. I think they were trying to get their location ready, but
where are they now? They're not in Highland Park.
They're not in Highland Park. Somewhere in downtown, I believe.
Downtown. Okay. Yeah.
I think we all need to support local businesses. I mean, through the chains, it's now more than ever. We just need to really, as much as we can, because they might not be around.
Yeah.
Cafes or record stores or restaurants that are in our neighborhood or close by, whatever, they need our support more than ever.
There was a report recently that said the largest majority of small businesses that have closed recently during this second wave will never reopen ever again.
And it was like a really high percentage. I can't remember the number, but it was pretty shocking.
And I've been driving around my neighborhood, and to see the amount of businesses that are closed down, I mean, we're going to have a ton of vacant buildings. It's a depressing sight to see.
The same thing is going on here in Barcelona. Everywhere you look, there's any kind of store, restaurant, or bar, or cafe, whatever that you can imagine, that's gone out of business, and it's all boarded up, there's signs up, and
it's a sad state of affairs, especially here in the U.S., because with the amount of bailout money that we've handed to major corporations and no help for small businesses, it's been incredibly sad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's sooner or later, we're going to be eating at Amazon restaurants for dinner.
Yeah. Everything's going
to be Amazon, Target, or I don't know, what's the next big corporation?
Walmart,
something like that.
They have the big lobbying groups on their side. I mean, I was talking to my agent who's living in Toronto, and he was saying the situation in Toronto is so bad right now because like during Black Friday, all the mom and pop stores, I mean, they're having kind of a lockdown as well in Toronto, and all those mom and like local stores, whatever, the small, family-owned businesses and small operations, whatever, they were all forced to close, while the Walmarts and and the big chains
they got to stay
allowed
open.
to stay open. Yeah,
I think this the same thing was happening like in France, in Paris. They were trying to stop Black Friday because of all the bookstores that had to close during the first lockdown, and all these, like bookstores that have been open for hundreds of years, that can't survive because of like Amazon, so.
Maybe we need to change the word Black Friday. Maybe that's
yeah.
But it's not even a Black Friday anymore. Like those sales go on like all month now.
True, very true.
Even Cyber Monday, like most sales I've seen is like we're extending Cyber Monday all through November. It's like, okay, it's not even one day anymore.
But there were like, during Black Friday, there were some like the Zaras and those big chains. They had some crazy sales where I was walking around the city and there were people waiting in line that looked like they'd been waiting hours in.
Yeah.
And on top of like all the people that are going out to take advantage of the sales, you have like the limits on the number of people that can enter the.
Yeah, I can understand that if you see, maybe see something more for our guests, but those queues in Japan when you're queuing up for a certain particular item, that people just mass buying because it's cheap. They're not actually buying anything maybe that they really need. It's just they're going to a sale.
Yeah.
That's a good transition for our guest, Hiroco, which she probably lined up for the McRib, right? Let's bring her on if she's there.
Guys.
Hey.
What's up?
I didn't bring any McRibs. Sorry, I ate them all.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Hola, Hiroco.
Cheers.
Hi.
I'm drinking
Humex.
mango. Yeah, this is the good stuff.
My mom used to drink that stuff, like always in the fridge growing up. There was always Humex.
This is like the most sugar you can get in any beverage in like one deal. So
it's like worse. It's probably worse than a soft drink.
I'm sure, but that's why I love it.
Hiroco, I'm very excited that you show because I don't know if you know this, but I'm a total Japanophile. I'm like obsessed with all things Japanese, and I'm a sake sommelier to a degree. And you're the first, guest from Japan. Well, I must confess, I don't know too much about your background, but everybody I know that knows you speaks so highly of you.
I'm sure they're saying terrible stuff about me. Guys. No, I appreciate that. I was born in the States, but I spent a lot of time in Japan, lived there a bit when I was younger, and go every few years. So I'm not quite the sake connoisseur, but
maybe by the end of this show.
I'm here to learn. I'm taking notes.
What part of Japan is your family from?
My mother's side is from Tokyo, and my father's side is from Kyushu, an area called Sasebo in Nagasaki Prefecture.
Okay. I was just in Kyushu in January.
Kyushu's the way to go,
It's the home of the onsen. The onsen is the natural hot springs, and there's more onsens on Kyushu Island than anywhere else in Japan, and it's just magical. It's a magical.
Things are really spread out there because there's not a lot of places to build because it's so hilly, and it's very different. If you've ever been to like central Japan, if you ever go to southern Japan, it's culture shock because everybody thinks Japan is Tokyo, right? And you watch all the movies and stuff, and Tokyo is just its kind of own crazy place.
The first time I went to Japan, I went to an onsen in I think the city or the area was called Arima. I don't know exactly where.
Yeah.
You know that place?
Yeah.
Or the area, is that a city or is that just the name of that onsen? Do you know?
I think it's a prefecture, but
what is
I'm probably making that up. A prefecture, it's kind of like a state, because you have to think about how small the island actually is. What's crazy is Japanese people often, like when you go to another prefecture, for us, it would be like driving from San Fran to LA. It's like a real vacation,
Yeah.
So it's like a big deal.
So were you born in Chicago?
I was born in South Carolina, actually.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
I used to have a Southern accent, and I didn't know it. My parents like made me go to speech therapy because they insisted that I had well, they called it like a slang accent.
Or a
When
twang.
you're a kid, you don't hear your own accent, right? But my parents could barely speak English, so I was like, how do you think I have an accent? You know, you can't even say like McDonald's, you know. So
you speak Japanese?
I do speak Japanese. I have like the grade schoolers ability of stuff. So my reading comprehension is terrible. I can swear a lot and order food. That's pretty much how it goes.
What else do you need?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same. I came to America when I was 7 years old, and I wasn't a very good Persian school student on Saturday mornings for obvious reasons. So
it worked out.
But it's interesting that they sent you a speech therapy. Like, what kind of there's a slang for every part of the country.
You know,
so
South Carolina, I was in Charleston. If you've ever seen like Gone with the Wind, it's like this very specific Charleston accent. It's like this weird mix of almost like it's Southern drawl mixed with like kind of a British formation of words. So yeah, if I get really drunk, sometimes it comes out. It's pretty funny. People will be like, "What are you saying right now?" And I'm like,
yeah. How did your family end up there as opposed to like the West Coast?
So my father is an immunologist. So we kind of were just chasing research funds when we were young. So my dad was doing research. So wherever there was like a project or whatever, we moved around a lot. So I lived in Canada, Michigan, Pittsburgh, South Carolina, and ended up in Chicago.
Were you ever on the West Coast?
No, I just had to think in my head which was west and east. I had to do that math every time.
So then when did you end up in Chicago?
It was I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. And maybe kindergarten is when we moved. So it's been a while. Yeah.
And did you I'm assuming you moved with your family to Chicago.
Yes.
Yeah. And is your family still there?
Yeah, we are. My family, only my direct family is in America. Everyone else is still in Japan. But yeah, everyone's living in separate places now. So.
And do you go back to Japan regularly, like once a year?
Yeah, I try to go like twice a year if possible. You know, it's crazy. You can do Japan on the cheap, right? That's one thing people never know about. Like especially Tokyo is really this like middle class city, right? The average income of the person living in Japan, it's, you know, when you are in the States, there is like really cheap stuff and really expensive stuff, and the selection of food and shopping and all that kind of stuff is really targeted up or down, right? But Tokyo is really a city that was built for the middle class. So the selection is mostly in that bandwidth.
You can live like a king.
Absolutely. You could do Japan on like $50 a day.
Oh, totally. Easy.
That's a lot.
Easily one of my favorite cities in the entire world.
Yeah, I love Tokyo.
I think that is the one gig or trip that I look forward to more than anything every single year.
Yeah, Japan's really a lovely place, but I think it's like it's a very old way of doing things, and so, you know, it's very patriarchal. I can't speak English correctly right now. Sorry. And things are different there. So it's got its host of problems, but they're very much for the Japanese, the problems. So it's a really fun place to go.
So do you have a Japanese passport?
I don't. Japan's one of the places that you can't have dual citizenship with America.
What?
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, Japan's got these weird rules. So if you are born in Japan and your mother is Japanese, but your father is American, you're not Japanese. There's these very strange rules about naturalizing there.
Wow.
I mean, Iran is the same. Like, if I wanted to go back to Iran, I would have to go to the Iranian embassy, get an Iranian passport, and enter with an Iranian passport, because they don't accept the fact that someone who was born in Iran changed their citizenship.
Yeah.
It's quite similar. Now, what's your earliest musical memory? Was that in North Carolina?
South Carolina? Earliest musical memory, like dirty musical memory, or like what are we talking about?
Whatever. Whatever was that spark.
Give us the dirt.
Yeah, the dirt. You know, like a good Japanese girl. I grew up playing violin, Suzuki method. So, our parents forced us to play instruments from a very early age, which actually screws you up. If you know anything about Suzuki method, it's basically playing by ear. So you learn to hear notes. And so I never learned to read music. I would just pretend the whole time and kind of go along with stuff. And so I still can't read music. Yeah, we grew up listening to that kind of stuff. And I grew up listening to a lot of heavy metal.
That seems like a great way to learn.
It is, but it's a great way to like hate everything about, you know, when you have to go to school an hour before everybody else and do orchestra practice, and you just want to play electric guitar instead. It's not cool lugging around a violin case in junior high. Yeah.
When did you like other types of music? Was it always like that?
It's always like that. I have two older sisters, and they were like, they're pretty goth growing up, and I had some cool neighbors. So very early on, my friends and my sisters kind of forced like a new wave and that kind of music on me. So I didn't even know what was cool. I was just kind of told it was cool. So yeah. I appreciate that.
It's always good to have siblings with good taste in music.
Yeah, they listen to garbage now. That's pretty surprising.
Oh, shit. That's
at the time.
I mean, my sibling had bad taste in music, and I kind of just gravitated in the other direction.
Yeah.
I didn't take the bait.
Yeah.
I took all the bait. I always take the bait.
And both of my sisters had terrible taste in music, but my brother had pretty damn good taste. So I was lucky to have him force feeding me shit all the time. Don't listen to that. Listen to this. You got
shit. Sisters, Mo?
I do, yeah.
You gotta send me some pictures.
Hiroco, do you in looking back at the forced violin lessons?
Yeah.
Do you value that period in your life? Did it inform?
Yeah, I think so. I think getting to do that kind of stuff it's a privilege, right? You know, having access to music and an instrument, and most of the time your parents do know better. If I wasn't doing that, I'm sure I'd be like breaking into stuff and like doing bad stuff. So it kept me out of trouble because I'm naturally kind of inclined to do terrible things. And like I said, though, because of that, like I shortcut a lot of stuff. Like my music theory lessons were never, I just didn't pay attention because I was like, well, I can just listen to what they're playing and replay it. I'm not going to pay attention to what anyone's saying. So
you think if your parents didn't force you into music like that, I mean, there's a lot of parents that make their kids take piano lessons or whatever, just, as a matter of, I don't know, I don't even know, upbringing, procedure or whatever. Like, do you think you would have automatically on your own gravitated towards music?
Yeah, I hope so. It's always been such a big part of my life, and it's especially in Chicago, it's a big part of subculture. Like when I was a kid, music is kind of how you found your friends and figured out who was cool, or you get in. Like I was into skateboarding and stuff in high school, so there was really, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but like the punk rock scene and the industrial scene and all those things were really popping in Chicago. And so there's just no avoiding it. And hopefully it helped me get into music for the right reasons. But at the same time, there's really no right reason to get into music. So I think it helped.
Yeah.
And growing up in Chicago, obviously you were around the city where house music started and all that stuff. And was that at all any influence to
yeah,
I know
for
you're
sure.
into the more industrial music and stuff as well.
Before house music, there was.
Of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, house music.
What does that mean to you, Hiroco? What is
Wax Tracks? Wax Tracks was the foundation of kind of my musical tastes. It's funny. So Wax Tracks was actually used to have a store in Lincoln Park in Chicago. And so we would like take the train into the city and we'd all like skate over there. And at first I didn't even know it was a label. I just knew like they had like Morrissey posters there and like there's like goth chicks hanging out there. So we're going to hang out there too. But yeah, really Wax Tracks was a foundation here. And if you ever get a chance to watch the documentary about Wax Tracks, I really advise.
Yeah. Absolutely. That last documentary was really good.
But like house music for me, we were lucky because on commercial radio here, we've got a station called B96. So there was Bad Boy Bill and Julian Jumpin' Perez and all these other amazing DJs that were just on all the time. So you're growing up listening to mixed music versus just songs singularly. And so this idea of mixing, I think, I always tell people the bar in Chicago is super high because technically speaking, I think every DJ I know out of Chicago is technically a super proficient DJ because we grew up with this stuff all the time. But because that was on the radio, to me, it was kind of the standard music, right? So I initially didn't like house music, right? So because that's kind of the normie thing to do. So of course I got into like drum and bass and had to be really difficult about everything. So.
And was there a big drum and bass scene in Chicago?
There wasn't. It was actually really small, and that's what was interesting about it because it was a very small group of people. There was a crew here called Bass by the Pound. There's really some innovative DJs like Phantom 45 is out of here, 3D, JJ Jellybean. And so it was new, right? These guys cut one of the first like dub plates out of here. And so like dub plate culture and all that kind of stuff was really attractive to me. And to me, it was this idea of this music coming out of England, right? So it was foreign. And I was just being difficult. And at the time, DJ Sneak was working at Gramophone and he really hated drum and bass music and made these like fuck jungle t-shirts. So I was like, I like this stuff even more because DJ Sneak hates it. So.
I think this scene, like I think especially like drum and bass was maybe one of the last sort of counterculture scenes before the internet sort of literally wiped counterculture off the face of the earth, where literally people can learn about anything within one click. But like these scenes like drum and bass, you had to know about it, you had to really dig deep, there was.
Yeah, I think we're really lucky in that way, right? Like there was a social context around these different scenes because there were pockets of people, right? And so you could make friends because of that,
I was a skater when I was younger and I used to buy Thrasher magazine and I learned so much more about music through Thrasher that I didn't know anything about, but it was all about these little counterculture pockets of music, that went with the culture that is completely devoid now. You don't have that anymore,
Yeah.
What deck did you skate on? What was your last skateboard deck you had?
I was a big Matt Hainsley fan, so I was like H Street and then but everything, yeah.
Nice.
I've got a Palace skateboard, but I very rarely go out on it. I'm too old.
Yo.
Hiroko's always interrogating people about what decks they skate.
Yeah, I judge you by which deck you had. Did you ever skateboard, Ali?
I didn't skateboard, but I was into the clothing. Like I think Dub was heavily involved in skateboard clothing and also like snowboarding and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And obviously with the name Dubfire, I gravitated towards that. And most of my friends were doing it, but I think I had a skateboard for like a few years or something, but I'm just no good on skateboards or scooters or motorcycles,
Anything that requires balance, basically.
Yeah, I'm just.
Yeah, that's like my personality test with people. It's like, what skateboard deck you?
I sent a picture to Hiroco once when I was like 16. I had a skateboard. He's bagging on me by what kind of deck was it?
Was it like a Planet E or something?
It was a blind deck, I think.
Oh man,
with those old school grind kings on them.
Nice.
So were you me growing up in DC, I was really heavily into like industrial and goth, and we had like a crazy local punk scene with bands like Bad Brains and Fugazi. We had a lot of amazing venues, that all these guys played in. We had a record store that was like, I guess, our version of Wax Trax called Yesterday and Today Records, which people like Ian MacKaye and Dave Grohl from Foo Fighters and all the people that were bouncing around in between all those early bands, they did a stint at the record store, or they hung out at the record store, and I skip school and go there and hang out and just discover. I think I discovered Wax Trax at that record store. And I would go there daily to see what was coming in on that label. How would you say, how influential was, even before we get into like Trax Records and the early house scene, how influential was the Wax Trax label and the sort of goth industrial punk movement? And for you, was it a natural evolution into techno and that whole early?
Yeah, definitely. For me, it was like I was heavily into industrial scene. Really early on, my guitar teacher was actually a ministry. So I was in high school, and I'd found this.
What?
He used to be in ministry. He's no longer around, unfortunately. But his name was William Tucker, and he used to play in all these really amazing bands like Big Face, Ministry. Did some stuff with Skinny Puppy. And so I actually had no idea who he was when I started. And so really quickly, he turned me on to some really amazing music, hung out with really cool people, Chris Conley, Matt Jorgensen, and would take me along to these Big Face shows and cool stuff. Yeah, Chris, man, you got everything ready. So it's funny. So my first rave, I think this is like junior high or high school, is actually because Psychic TV was playing. There's a promoter here called Ripe. They kind of kicked things off in Chicago really early, innovators, and they did this party with Psychic TV. And at the time, I wasn't really interested in dance or rave music, but it was an opportunity to go see Psychic TV. And after that show, I was really like, hey, this is all right. I'm kind of into this. And there was this club in Chicago called Medusa's. Unfortunately, I was a little young to go to the original one, but they did the second one, and they would have a room of industrial and rock music that this guy, John Curley, would play, one of the innovators in Chicago. Yeah, so he was like one of the dudes back then, and really, really a tastemaker. And then they'd have house in the next room. So you could just go back and forth. And at first you kind of stick to your room, but you get sick of hearing like Nirvana being played all the time. So you end up in the house room. And it was a really amazing mix of people and subcultures kind of coming together. So Wax Trax as a label, I think they took a lot of risks. They released some really crazy experimental stuff, all this, as we were talking about earlier off camera, like Al and Paul and the Hyperluxa, Luxapan production stuff. They're just cranking stuff out constantly. Yeah. And we're really lucky to have all these amazing bands, and everybody, like the Thrill Kill Cult guys, all those guys, everyone was just super nice, right? They were just really approachable people that
were My Life for the Thrill Kill Cult.
Yeah,
they were one of my favorites.
They were so great. Frankie is such a nice guy. It was a group of people who were approachable, would talk to you about music, talk to you about all that kind of stuff, and so that made getting into music in the scene really, really great.
Especially there were appearance in the movie The Crow.
Sorry,
remember that?
Oh yeah.
Who did? Who was in
My Life for the Thrill Kill Cult. They did a live band portion in the movie The Crow.
There's that whole shootout scene where it gets crazy.
Oh my god, I had no idea. I gotta watch that.
Oh yeah.
And what's it called? Bauhaus was in the beginning of The Hunger.
Yeah, that was so great.
And Catherine Deneuve. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I was fortunate enough in some ways to meet these people that I idolized, that were in these groups that I worshipped, like Bauhaus and
Did you meet Peter Murphy?
Yeah, I had dinner with Peter Murphy in Antwerp.
So jealous.
And David J is still one of my very good friends to this day, and I'm still like pinching myself. I don't know how that happened, but I kind of know how it happened, but I didn't realize that we would, 20 years later after meeting, we would still be friends and see each other whenever.
What a legend! That's great.
Hey, Ali, which was the guy from Bauhaus you said that watches the show sometimes?
David watches.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's probably watching.
How's my makeup? I should have taken a shower today.
So were you meeting? I mean, you're in Chicago. You're in the birthplace of this incredible wave. It's this first wave of industrial and goth or whatever, and then this second wave of or right alongside that of what was happening in the early techno and house scene. How were you absorbing all of that, and were you meeting your idols? Were you hanging out with them?
I was really lucky. I used to do radio in high school as well, so kind of used that to get guest lists and interviews. I wrote for a bunch of fanzines back then. I used to work for this little zine called Industrial Nation back in the day, and so that's my way to not pay for shows and meet I got to meet Susie Sue, Robert Smith.
You met Susie. Oh my god,
that was amazing. So really, really lucky that came into the music the way I did. So spoiled at an early age.
Wow.
But yeah, it's Chicago has got so much talent here. It's always it's one of those cities. It's tough sometimes to see such talented people not succeed sometimes, right? You'll see such amazing people doing amazing things, but it's and the amount of DJs here per person, and I'm sure when you're a DJ, you're friends with even more DJs, but it's one of those things that it's like anything, right? The success rate at anything is always really, really tough. So you see so many talented DJs and producers just not break that barrier, right? So it's tough to see.
How was that? I mean, how was Chicago pre-pandemic, with all the with the scene, and was it doing good? I mean,
I think Chicago's always been doing well, and I think since we're so spoiled, right? We've got you guys come through every once in a while. There's so much to choose from that people start to, I don't want to say become complacent, but there's a great event every night with so and so DJ. So, are you going to go out that weekend? And the fees for these promoters and clubs, they get higher and higher, and it's harder for them to break even. So the scene is great here, but I think sometimes Chicago needs to look at its own talent once in a while. We've got Hyperactive, we got Mike Dearborn, we've got all these amazing DJs, and I'm sure it's the same where you're at. When you're the local DJ, you're still a local DJ, right? And so it's more exciting when somebody you don't get to see, at the local coffee shop comes in and plays. So I completely understand that. You're spending all your money to go to a club, you want to have more of an event, right? You want to have something special.
I mean, do you think are people caught up in the nostalgia of Chicago when it comes to dance music, or are they?
Not really. I think because it never went away. So it's like, it's not even nostalgic here, right? So the people, the innovators, the Ron Carrolls and Mike Dunn's, they're still here doing the same thing. And, my personal wish is that these guys would get more attention in Chicago versus having to go overseas.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's been a problem that plagues pretty much every city, is that cities never really ever appreciate their own and the locals. And I think that was one thing in the beginning of this pandemic that I put such a great emphasis on, was that I was hoping that when things did begin to slowly open up again, that it was time that every individual city would support and represent their own locals before booking, outside DJs to come and play again.
Yeah.
And I hope that's a reset that takes place, because I agree with you 100%. I don't think that a lot of cities really appreciate the homegrown talent that they have in their own city.
I mean, listen, I'm not complaining. I do like to travel, so I
will, well, of course. I mean,
I will accept outside gigs, but there's just so many amazing artists here that I do my best to try to get people exposed, but there's only so much you can do, right? You can't dismiss the customer, right? The person that's going to the event, they like what they like, right? You can't tell them, you should like this instead. You shouldn't like this DJ just because they're from Europe. You like what you like, and you don't have to justify it. So if you want to see this artist or this DJ, then it is your choice as a customer. And the promoters and clubs, they can try to push all these local nights. You see it all the time, and they try to package it in a certain way. But if people aren't attending those events, there's not much you can do about it, right? You're just asking these promoters to,
I think when we I was going to say, I saw it quickly, but when we were growing up, right, I think we can all probably attest that we had these local scenes, and this is before Instagram, where people would support their buddies. You'd go to these parties, and even if they're in a big city, even in London, the parties were very kind of like, it was like a local scene in each hub, so each club had its own crew. You'd go to this one, go to that one, and people weren't so sort of obsessed with what was on Instagram or these idols that they need to have. And I think that's now, of course, when I was younger, like Tony Humphries or someone would come once a year to London. That was a big deal. It wasn't like maybe someone like Dixon, who's playing in a major city maybe 4 or 5 times a year, or like any of us, constantly on this merry-go-round. It was a very special occasion to have a guest, so I think it made these scenes very sort of special, it's very different.
I mean, do you think like people in your hometown, they take homegrown talent for granted? Does everybody want I
think there's no way around that, because it's like, that's your homie, right? So you see them all the time. And it's, especially when you start DJing professionally, everybody is a DJ at that point, right? So you run into so many DJs. So being able to distinguish that, of course, there's those people that are going to stand out, right? And since electronic music has grown away from the rave scene, right? Post rave and after things have gotten to the size they are, the finances that it takes to put on events are, they're 10 times what they were in the 2000s or 90s, right? And the risk involved. So, there's only so many times you can ask your homies to come to your gigs too, right? They're like, dude, I'm going to play PlayStation tonight. I'm not going to come out to your show again and pretend to be excited,
If you're traveling around the world and you're playing in your hometown, let's say twice a year, how special is that for you, for all of you? What does that feel like? Do you feel like you're coming home and is there a different feeling than when you're playing elsewhere? And do you want it to be, obviously you want it to be well attended, but do you want it to have some sort of, significant meaning because it's your hometown? Like, are you trying to place some deep meaning, like a coming home kind of scenario to the gig?
I mean, I could say David and I both have pretty warm welcomings when we play here in LA. People still tend to generally be fairly excited whenever we play, but then again, I think we also try to space it out as much as possible. We don't try to play too often because then you fall back into that homie circle again.
And escape it.
Yeah, but that's easier to do when you're traveling. But if you're a local DJ, that's much more difficult to find that allure,
So Hiroco, like when you play Spybar regularly, right?
Yeah. So, it's actually, one of the pieces of advice I've gotten lately is to reduce the amount of times I play Chicago and Spybar. It's one of those things though that, like, I'm a pretty antisocial person to begin with. So it's a reason for me to leave the house if I go out and play. And I just really enjoy DJing. So if I'm not playing anywhere else and it's a Saturday night and there's a show, and if it's a friend especially, I'll be there, right? It's a fun time. But at the same time, like, you do want to keep things special and make it an event for people. So it's one of the things I've kind of been wrestling with a bit because, if it's just available all the time and you're just that person hanging out at the club in the corner, which is me, people aren't going to be that excited to see you. But yeah, I'm going to be at Spybar no matter what. So,
it's a great club.
But Hiroco, don't you also kind of, do you do bookings for Spybar as well?
I don't. Okay. I'll make suggestions here and there about like what is, the bookers in the city, like Sunbar and Spybar, they know what they're doing, and I think people have to give bookers their credit. They've been doing this for years. They know what works. But at the same time, I'll always say, like, my homie is crushing it right now. You really want to have them in here and give the suggestion. But no, I'd be terrible at booking a club. Like, it would just be like my friends and I playing Nintendo in the corner, looking at memes and like listening to hard techno, and everyone being miserable. But
it sounds like a good time.
Yeah, it does sound like a good time. My idea of a good time doesn't necessarily match up with other artists, but like Mo was saying, I think things are going to reset. Nobody knows what clubs are even going to be open anymore, right? Who's going to be able to sustain rent this entire time? Who's gone on to another job and is like, wow, I really like doing this. I don't want to DJ anymore. I don't want to be a promoter anymore. People have had to kind of turn their eye to other things. And a lot of my friends who are musicians, promoters, all these things, they found something else they actually really like throughout all this. Unfortunately, that's not everybody, but hopefully when things do open, we do focus on this local talent. The music I've been hearing from people that have been kind of just working during quarantine has been amazing. All these people out of Chicago have been crushing it, like really, really great stuff coming out. So
great. I should also mention that Spybar reached out to me to be a part of they're doing a benefit with a lot of DJs involved, and I'm pre-recording my stream, I think this weekend, to support.
Yeah, we're gonna announce something pretty soon. So.
Yes, I think it's important to support, all the clubs, all of our favorite clubs that we've been playing for years around the world.
Yeah, they're just, once there's all these people I know that are servers, bartenders, their livelihood has been put into nightlife, and for this reset, it's been excruciatingly hard, right? So we'll see where things end up.
Yeah. So going back to that era, that really magical era of Wax Trax, and how much of a crossover was there in the two different scenes? Like, were the kind of crowds that were going to see Front 242 or Ministry, were they going to DJ Pierre?
I think there was definitely a difference. They were separate groups. The house scene had its definite crews, and the industrial scene, because once again, this is like subculture, right? It was more than music. There was a whole like ethos behind it, and there were other like inferred commonalities by being into these same music. But I think as the internet grew and communication about these genres, it all kind of just started to mush together. But industrial also kind of took this turn into metal land at some point, where things got super metal for a bit, which I loved, right? And then you had
maybe Al had something to do with it.
Al had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, with the dark side of the spoon.
Uncle Al.
And so I think, just because it had been so perfect, it had to grow, right? You even look at like what Trent Reznor was doing, or the Skinny Puppy guys. The music started to diversify. A lot of these bands started making straight up dance music. Some of them went into making more organic rock music. Some of them went into folk bands and stuff. I think when you have a scene that is that iconic, and there's this pressure, I'm sure like even like follow up 9 Inch Nails albums and stuff, people would be like, that's not industrial, or people were judging what was goth or what was industrial or what was falling into these categories. And none of these bands personally even subscribe to those labels, right? They're just making
exactly
music,
what I was going
right?
to say. Yeah.
They're like, we don't know what we're making. At the time, most of these instruments were like pretty new to them, and the synth is just gonna make the sound that it's gonna make, and you're gonna label it what you will. So
why do you think people feel the need to label music or genres?
I mean, I think it's important too. As much as it sucks, you have to have some guidance for people, right? So when I was a kid, now that I've consumed it and I was part of it and got to experience it, I can easily say, oh, fuck these labels. They demonetize the idea. But when you're first getting into things, right? When I was looking through record bins, like I would need to see like the techno bin at Gramophone that was labeled hard techno, or this is happy hardcore or whatever. And so whoever was working at the store that day, it was their choice whether this was house, hard house, acid house, whatever it was. And I listened to that. And I think, you go to Beatport now, and they've got 50 million different subgenres for whatever music. And it's a coin flip, really, right? Yeah. No one, most people aren't making a song thinking like, this is going to be hard techno or whatever,
Yeah.
I think
when we were going to record.
Sorry, I think people are now when they make music, but I think maybe people in Chicago if I think about the music in the 80s that influenced Chicago house, it was this melting pot of so many different kinds of music. People weren't thinking, I need to be in this genre on Beatport, they were just throwing everything into it. And that's why they were experimenting with synths or whatever, it was very freeform right back then, I guess, Sorry, Ali, come on.
No, I was going to say, like, we would walk into a record store, we would have somebody that we trusted, that we knew in the record store, that was our musical curator.
Absolutely.
So we'd go in. I mean, I would go in, whether it was New York or DC or Chicago or San Francisco, whatever, and somebody would hand me just a stack of records. They wouldn't give me any sort of context of what this or that genre is. And they just, over time, understood my personal preference. And there were many times where I saw smirk or a raised eyebrow when they discovered that I liked something that fell outside of what they had, pinned me as liking.
Yeah.
And that's how they got to know what I was into and how adventurous and how open-minded I was. And that's something that it's really sad that the kids today don't have that experience.
Yeah, I think that's a very ideal and beneficial experience to have at a record store, to be able to have someone curate music or even just give you a stack of suggestions to go through. But like you were just saying, unfortunately, not everybody has that these days. And I think genres are a way for people to compartmentalize things so that they could find more material similar to what they like. Like, let's say you discover some record, you have this natural inclination to crave more of that, maybe from a diverse, different selection of bands or groups, but you want more of that sound. So I think the genre labeling helps you, put a name to it so that you can find other artists within that same realm.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of sucks about like not having the vinyl experience is you don't get that B-side that you're kind of surprised by later, or the rest of the, if you bought an album, you're picking it up for that one track, right? Not the 3 other slabs of vinyl in there, but you happen to put that one on. Maybe you're drunk that night and you grab the wrong record and you put that on because the label looked the same, but you're like, wow, this slaps, right? So there's a lot less kind of like accidental music finding with digital because you're honing in. People don't necessarily buy albums in groups like they used to. It's kind of this like single culture.
I mean, you can't resell MP3s, can you?
Right. We can try. We can try. There's a way to make money off it.
This is the thing, a lot of labels these days, like, I mean, they're selling the albums the same, the digital albums the same as buying the vinyl. So you might as well buy the vinyl, even.
Yeah.
Like you said, you might listen to something you didn't, you never thought you'd listen to.
Yeah, so. I personally try to buy albums all the time because usually there is some concept there, right? Whether it's fabricated or pre-thought about. There's a reason the songs are in this order. There's a reason they're together on this release. Right. And, I think that's part of the experience if the artist chooses to release those things together. So it's more expensive, but I think you get more out of it if things are sold as a pack and you listen to them all together.
What do you think of dance music albums? I mean, they're bands and they're electronic music artists that really take great care and putting together like a collection of songs that belong together as a cohesive project.
I think it's just as valid and just as important. I think in electronic music, you potentially have a faster turnaround. So sometimes things are just slapped together. Like a lot of various artist compilations maybe aren't so thought out. But I think generally, if an artist puts a group of songs together, that's part of the experience for me. Like front to back, I like to listen to things, right? So even rock music, electronic music, whatever it might be, that's also the great thing when an artist releases a mixed version of that in the order that they released it. So I think it's important, right? Because a lot of the great content on that album is not necessarily like a dance floor banger, right? Yeah. And so you might not listen to that while you're picking out your tracks for whatever set you're going to do, but you could be passing up a really inspiring or influential or a piece of work that you really enjoy. And so many artists that make great dance music make other music that it's harder to sell, right? It's hard to sell like some 10-minute ambient song that's not dance floor oriented. So you got to package it somehow.
Yeah.
It seems like these days people also don't listen to music to the same song enough over and over and over again. I mean, I can think of some of my most favorite albums being albums that like every time you listen to it, you discovered something new that you didn't hear before. And like every time you listen to it, you peel back the layers. And it just seems like music has such an incredibly short shelf life these days that people just skip through tracks and they listen to them a handful of times and it just becomes disposable.
Well, it's just tough, right? Like before you would go in a record store and once a month there'd be 3 or 4 tracks that you enjoyed or you picked off the shelf. Nowadays, there's 500 releases every weekend, and a lot of them could be great, but like, how do you even approach that? I'm sure when you guys go through promos, you're just like, as great, you know, I really appreciate all the promos that I get, and I think it's nice to be on the receiving end of those. But after a while, you're just kind of you're going through them. Some of them will really stick out. You know, you'll really be like, this is great. So you can't. That's one of the great things about digital music is there's so many artists and people from all sorts of backgrounds and capabilities can release that day, right? You could be terrible and make this horrible song in GarageBand, and it'll be on Spotify that next day, right? But that also lends to kind of this idea of this disposable culture, right? Where people have a hard time paying 99 cents for a track, right? Or they will not even pay for a Spotify stream or stuff like that. So, but they've got no problem spending $3,000 for bottle service party that playing at.
You know, I think we all grew up with the where you had you had all these filters in place, whether it was the A&R guy, the record shop owner, you know, the guy doing the promo pulls. There was so many filters you had to get through, so that you know, so the DJ in the pools or whoever would actually hear this music. And now, I mean, it's just so easy, right? So whether it's good or bad that's the thing.
The problem is that's turned into the PR agencies now, right? So it's like, for you to get in this promo pool to this particular artist, this artist has had to pay this PR agency to get it in front of Mixmag or somebody, or to get this into that promo pool. And so that control has moved to a different party that may not necessarily have those interests in mind, right?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit like the payola in the early 20th century with radio, you know.
Yeah,
that's now happening within dance music or electronic music or every kind of music, especially with like Spotify with playlists, you know, and all of that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, yeah, you're right, Matt. You had to. There were layers. You had to jump through hoops. I mean, you had to get, you know, an A&R at a label interested in your music enough to want to sign it, and then there was the cost of, you know, putting it out on record.
Yeah.
And there was a promo cycle. There was PR behind it, and there was just all this, you know, support and all this time that it took.
Yeah,
from the time that it was signed to it coming out. So, and everybody, you know, was on board and everybody believed in it. So there are all these curators, you know, little curators, kind of hand-holding this little project of yours from.
Well, I always think
when it was coming out.
There's not enough respect as well for the record shop owners. They are the tastemakers, you know, they're the guys that, like you're saying, who would make sure if you walked in a shop, they know what you like. They would give you the right record that you could play at the weekend. You know, these were the people that were saying, "I'll buy 100 of this or 5 of that." You know, they would really, but they're not. I think they get the. It's hard for them, you know. They don't get the respect that they deserve, you know, because they were the guys that they were channeling all of the music that was coming through, you know. And I know, of course, companies like Beatport and everyone, Spotify, try and do the same, but it isn't the same. With if someone walks in a store and they are, you know, if you have that personal contact, then it's completely different, you know.
Hiroco, you mentioned this in interviews, and I think you brought it up here, that you were sort of shy and introverted when you were younger, and that maybe DJing helped you overcome those obstacles. And I don't know if you would consider yourself an extrovert now, or just someone who's balanced. But I think
I'm definitely not balanced. But
I mean, we're all trying to find that balance. But I really relate to that because I was also quite a shy, introverted kid when I was growing up. And when I read that kind of made me think about my own upbringing and how, for me, DJing, being in front of an audience every weekend, first with the residencies and then traveling abroad, and then always being thrust into these social situations where I was on the, I was put on the spot and in the spotlight. Like I naturally overcame those fears. Every once in a while, you still feel this small, like when you're really thrust out there in a particular situation. But for me, my career helped me overcome those social anxieties. And was that the same for you, would you say?
I think it kind of goes both ways. Like I'm kind of like a loud introvert, right? So if it's like one of you guys and it's the homies, I'm probably the most loud, annoying, opinionated person you know. But if I'm in an unfamiliar situation or I'm uncomfortable about things or anxious, like I shut down and I'll just be playing iPhone games and looking at memes before a show. And so you meet this commonality of music and a lot of people that I've become friends with. It happens not just because we're DJs, like someone mentions a piece of gear and they actually know what they're talking about, or you're at a show and this person actually knows about like Marvel Comics history, or they know about anime or something that you actually, there's these chances to meet people that you have common interests with that I wouldn't have if I was just sitting at home playing PlayStation. At the same time, because I'm put in these situations, or you're put in these situations where you're constantly kind of around unfamiliar situations, and there's pressure to be social and pressure to, I don't want to say be nice, because you should be nice all the time, but sometimes like when you're tired or anxious and you don't want people touching you or hugging you or whatever, it might come off as being short, right? That I'm like, hey, dude, I'm glad you were dancing all night, but you're covered in sweat. I'm not going to hug you, right? Or you just, like, after I play, I got to pee, right? I've been waiting to urinate the whole night. I need a cigarette and whatever it might be. So I beeline right away for the bathroom. So if, you're running into people on the way to the bathroom and you're like, I'm not being short with you. I'm just going to piss myself if I don't keep walking. Right? So
sometimes after you finish playing, you're, depending if you're traveling or not, you're
just
really
done.
tired. You're just like, okay, now is my time to get to the hotel and sleep for an hour or two before I have to go to the airport. And just like, I can't just hang out and just talk to people, And people will take that the wrong way and be like, he's an asshole.
That happens so often. I mean, so many of our friends and colleagues, I've had, like, you travel somewhere like, oh, you're friends with that one DJ. That guy's a fucking dick. And you're like, well, actually, he's one of the nicest dudes I've ever met in my life. But you just caught that person on the wrong day, and
I mean, listen,
they're a real dick, but
there are definitely those dudes.
I mean, listen, I am a dick. I'll accept that. But
so, Hiroco, I have to ask you, what did it mean to be on the seminal Trax label? You had your
Trax.
You had your release on Trax in 2016. First of all, what did it feel like to be on Trax? And second of all, why did it take you so long to have because was that the first time that you'd released something?
Yeah, so I was doing techno before that with working a lot with Submerge, and I was working with Joe Hyperactive on stuff. But so Trax is a messy thing in Chicago, and I think it's important to kind of.
So is DJ International.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys know the history of Trax, but for me at the time, our A&R guy was this guy Jorge, and actually he had grabbed my track off of SoundCloud and messaged me and was like, hey, I want to sign this. And I thought the person was joking. And I was like, wow. So Trax for me was a good experience. They did a lot for me. I know they've not done right for a lot of artists, and they've since changed hands multiple times, but the intent, I think, was good, right? And I think it's a legendary label that did legendary things, but at the same time, there's no you don't want to discount the history of the problems they've had with the artists, and the artists saying,
was that like a bucket list thing for you?
It really wasn't. It just someone had messaged me and was like, I want to sign this, and I was like, go ahead, it's got 5 likes on SoundCloud, it's yours, you know. So
did they know that you were a local artist?
I think so. This person had come and seen me DJ a couple times, and so I'd met them. And at first, I thought it was kind of like like club talking point to just like chat, being like, you know, people always like, hey, I want to sign you, or have weird conversations at clubs that don't actually amount to anything. So, you know, of course, like, yeah, of course, you know, no problem. And it turned into something. So it was definitely a great experience. It was a great bucket list. I met great people off of it, but the label has screwed over a lot of people, and a lot of artists that really created house music and created the sound, and they didn't see a penny of that, right? And there's a real problem with that scenario, right? And it's all too common that there's all these labels that and that being said, I think people also exaggerate how much a label might be making off a sale on a record. So, you know, I can do without that $5 royalty check from Beatport, you know, I'll be all right. But
did you get a lot of shit for releasing something on Trax?
I mean, you guys give me shit about everything I do, right? Yeah, I don't think so. I think people have been pretty supportive. And at the time, I really wasn't making much house music. I was mostly doing I was actually not doing music much at that time. I'd taken a break for a while from music.
Can you talk about 6 years? Actually, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, like, sure. So
hiatus from.
So I was doing like drum and bass. Had a little bit of success here and there. And
wait. Before you go any further, who was your favorite drum and bass artist, and what type of drum and bass were you in?
My favorite drum and bass artist, I was probably the biggest Diesel Boy fan in the world.
You know, Diesel Boy is a massive foodie.
Yeah, he's super great. He's a good friend now, and it's funny, we became friends on like AOL chat. I would like bother him all the time and like stalk Diesel Boy, and we became friends. And he actually helped me get a lot of my first initial bookings.
He was more into the sort of Ed Russian optical kind of sound, right?
Yeah, like, that's definitely tech step and all that was definitely my cup of tea. And I think
where's he from?
Diesel Boy or
the American Diesel Boy?
He's from Philly.
He's from Philly. Okay.
He's part of like Nigel Richards' crew on that 611 and all those guys. So, and so tech step had kind of died after a little while, and that sound, drum and bass, had gotten a lot more machismo, and it wasn't this kind of like technical dark sound anymore. And in Chicago, the drum and bass scene just kind of changed. And at the time, there are just things going on in my life where I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do this job now. And I decided I was going to be a professional and not do music. And was like kind of done with that portion of my life. I had these cool roommates I would hang out with all the time.
Did you ever go to London during your drum and bass?
I did. I went to like the movement parties.
Like Brian G's.
Yeah, I went to Brian G's. I went to the end when like they would do the Renegade Hardware. I don't think I went to Blue Note. Actually, they did movement at Blue Note, I think. It's funny. So I had walked in, I think it was actually the Blue Note, and it was like at the height of the like Brazilian drum and bass fad where like V Records was
Marquee.
Like, all those dudes. And so I had met those guys in Chicago a month before. And so when I walked in, the MC was like, hey, Chicago's in the house. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And like, yeah.
Were you going to like Bar Rumba and Swerve and places like that? Like,
not regularly.
We went, I think in the mid-90s, we went from, you know, going to house and techno clubs. You got to remember there was, in the mid-90s, there was this whole sort of like fluffy bra, sort of sort of crappy house scene that was evolving in the UK. It was this very commercial scene, and then the flip side, you had things like Metalheads was going on, which was a progression of like Rage, and we were going there every week. So we stopped taking pills, and then we were just smoking dope every Sunday night, going to Blue Note and listening to Adam F, Groove Rider. Yeah, that was the vibe.
I love Johnny L. Remember Johnny L?
Oh, Johnny L.
Mm-hmm.
That Groove Rider Piper remix.
This was the only club where you
would
go there and you hear the records, and then you wouldn't be able to buy the record for like at least another year.
Yeah, it was all dub plates.
Yeah, all dub plates, and it was a really sort of very progressive and exciting scene, and it did become something completely different. But at that time, it was really exciting.
It's magic.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always think, maybe it's more of a disco house guy, but I think the whole dancing thing I'm definitely more into the 120s, 130 BPM than I am into the 160 BPM.
Yeah, I can't imagine you dancing to drum and bass.
People dance in halftime to that.
Yeah.
You just go crazy.
It was like the halftime step or whatever you call it.
We had a rather large drum and bass scene in Los Angeles.
You guys had like Reed Speed, REW.
There's a club called Respect that's still, before COVID, it's still running. It's been like 20 years. It's still like every Thursday.
Yeah. My wife was a huge drum and bass fan in the 90s because I knew my wife back in the 90s when we were both just ravers at the time, and we were just hunting down all the techno parties, and she was just strictly going to drum and bass parties only. And she hated techno.
Remember, man, there was such a sort of divide. I remember Francois K playing at Plastic People and playing a really beautiful set, and then playing drum and bass, everyone leaving.
Yeah.
There was this kind of like, it was such a divide between this music, which was great. This needed to happen, but people with all these house heads couldn't deal with it. Which is
what's interesting, like about especially in the Midwest. I'm not very familiar with the whole history of the Midwest scene, but I know
we got corn here.
Yeah, but it's like the Midwest is so obsessed with bass, like you play on these raves with like massive sound systems, and like, how come you don't hear much about drum and bass, or why wasn't drum and bass bigger than it was, with so many people in the Midwest obsessed with like bass? You know what I mean?
I think it does kind of exist. Like every time I'd go to Wisconsin, you'd always see all like the drum and bass and kind of dubstep dudes that were huge.
But I feel like it wasn't
sound systems.
Like maybe because I wasn't in that scene, it feel like it wasn't as big as like what like techno and like drop bass was back in the days. You know what I mean?
But the amazing thing about drum and bass was how diverse the different sounds were. Like sometimes I was in like an LTJ Bookham mood. I wanted like really pretty ambience. Sometimes it was like Ed Rush Optical, or what is it, Bad Company?
Bad Company.
Ali,
Fresh in Vegas.
And sometimes it was like Fabio with his kind of jazz, or Ronnie Size with kind of the jazzy end of the spectrum. There was and then there was all these other kind of offshoots of those genres, like in between.
It was Goldie last week. I think it was 25 years of Timeless.
Did you hear the remixes? It's fucking amazing.
That album is incredible.
Who did the remixes?
It was my favorite remix, and there was one version that was kind of a re-vocal by Carlene Anderson, who was one of my favorite soul singers, who was in the Young Disciples, who I fortunately met a long time ago. But
the Photech remixes of Inner City Life, but the hip hop remixes that he did, which came out on
pull that up now. Inner City. Yeah, they just remastered it, and it was like,
I'll have to pick that up.
Inner City.
What about Speed Garage in the UK? Wasn't that kind of where
Speed Garage?
That's a big. Mo, that's a big thing in Berlin, especially with guys, all of the sort of Romanian DJs. That's a big thing here.
Right now, currently.
Well, that's what they've progressed to. It was gone into this very sort of like techie. They're because they're all into this. Oh, hello.
Oh my gosh.
Jojo.
What do we have?
DJ
here?
Hyperactive is in the house.
Been sent to monitor Hiroco.
Oh man. Chris, you look different today.
This is for people that don't know, this is DJ Hyperactive from Chicago.
What's up, Damon?
Friend of ours and good
Mo.
friend of Hiroko's.
Hey man.
Hi, Hiroco.
Hi, Daddy. For those of you guys that don't know, Joe is like the foundation of techno in Chicago and really kind of established the sound here, introduced us to music, and a lot to LA as well. So Joe
Absolutely.
is such a huge part of all of our lives, my life.
Uncle Joe.
He sucks at poker.
Yeah, Joe was supposed to cover my buy-in to the poker game last night.
Yeah.
Oh man, what? You were late? No, you were getting a mix done. I've been shaking you down over. Well, thank you for the compliment, Chico. Thank you. That was.
Hey Joe. Hey Joe, have you ever met Ali Dubfire or Matt Radio Slave?
I'm trying to remember.
Matt, I met at
Many times.
a couple times, yeah.
Yeah.
But not
Especially
Ali.
a
No. How you doing, man?
I do.
Yeah.
There's always somebody you haven't met. That's. I mean,
That's sure too.
Yeah.
You're lucky. You got off.
Hiroco, have we ever met?
Yeah, we've met. We've met at Spy Bar, and I think we hung out in some Eastern European country. It was very brief.
Hiroco, I wanted to ask you, going back to the drum and bass thing, like in Chicago, like, I mean, how expensive were the imports back then, and was it a big deal getting these records? Because
I mean, it was a fight for the white labels, right?
Wow.
So there'd be 2 white labels of whatever hot track was on dub plate circulation for that year, and so you'd really have to kind of like kiss up to the buyer at the time, which I gladly did.
Do you think that the music that came out of the UK affected the sound that came out of Chicago?
Yeah, for sure. I think I mean, drum and bass is for me was this very British thing, right? Especially in all these Bristol crews and the London crews. And the problem was it became this like, while the dub plate culture was super cool, it became like this obsession with dub plates, right? So everyone have this like VIP version of this track that no one else had. And then so you had people actually like ripping tracks off of Radio 1 mixes, cutting them to dub plate and like reassembling them in like, what would it be, acid at the time or something. And but actually people became good producers because of that, because they had to reassemble tracks that they were like didn't have access to the dub plates to. But you know,
like during that whole. Go ahead.
No, so go ahead.
No. I was gonna say during that whole era of like the white label, like, did you guys ever play a white label, even if it was a bad record, but you played it because you had
all the time, all the time. There, you know, lots of, especially in Chicago, people would put out bootleg mixes of stuff, and you knew how it was because it was your friend, but there was no information written on it, and there was this period of time that just pressing got really bad, right? Like people were just shooting out tons of records without thinking about how good the cut was on it. I think because the cutting houses were so busy, and sometimes the quality of the dub wasn't as good as it should be. But you'd have to like put your penny on the record so it wouldn't skip on the needle because the pressing was so bad.
So how did Hyperactive and Hiroco meet?
Hyperactive. So Joe, of course, I would go see play all the time, and
as we all did.
He was how I really learned about techno. He also worked at a hip house at the time, I think, right?
Yeah.
So he was the buyer there, and funny enough, I ended up with Joe's old Gabber records. He had sold all these old, like Mokum and these old hardcore records that I ended up with.
Still got them?
Yeah, of course.
Fuck.
That old like Rotterdam hardcore is.
Oh yeah.
What were the BPMs?
Oof.
Gosh, like
180,
150,
Yeah.
160.
Yeah.
Up
150,
there.
160. Okay.
They're
Oh,
moving.
you're totally on
How do you
180.
How do you guys feel about the resurgence of those BPMs today? Are you following musically what's happening with?
There's
kind
a
of-
weird crossover sometimes where some of the like popular techno
Mhm.
is really kind of hitting in that gabber range sometimes,
Business
and it's
techno, we call it.
and it's like, yeah, it also sounds like DJ Sammy at the same time. It's like, is this like hardcore? Is this like, Cascada or something? So I don't know. I've always we also like Delta 9 is also from Chicago. He's the old
Delta 9, Unkind Mind Grind.
So he was also like one of the dudes that was really influential and was really
and
nice
Tron as well.
Yeah.
DJ Tron.
All right,
Rest in peace. Rest in peace.
So like Chicago was very informed by what was going on in Wisconsin and the drop bass crew.
Yeah.
They do these further parties, and those were like the epicenter of hardcore for the US, I think.
Yeah.
And Joe's got some records out with them, and I always have a soft spot in my heart for hardcore, even like
Me
happy
too.
hardcore. So
Well, it's no secret. Me and David's roots are in, both of us grew up in hardcore in the gabber scene in the 90s too. So
you guys are like Dr. Freakall's kids, right?
totally,
Yeah.
100%. Randy Core to the max.
Yeah.
But like
Randy
but
Core.
even Joe, where Joe, when he
Moved to LA.
at Higher Source, they sold Gabber records at Higher Source. I remember. I would find some there too.
But it's a little weird to hear that in like these mega techno sets. I think like
hardcore
if people like it, they like it. But yeah.
Hardcore was huge in LA back in the mid 90s, and even like Delta 9 was like a really popular DJ out here for sure. His parties.
Tron and Delta 9 came to
too.
LA like at least once or twice a month. They were here.
Yeah,
Sid was probably bringing them at least once.
Yeah.
Joe, when was the first time you heard Hiroco in a club in Chicago? And what did you think?
He probably just punched me or something.
I spilled a drink on her.
Because you guys are obviously, I'm assuming there was a connection because you guys are friends to this.
Yeah, well, I started playing at Shelter when it was still open.
Yeah.
Resident there with like Derek Carter and
Curly.
That was the first club I ever played in Chicago. I played a casual party.
Oh, right.
at
Nice.
Shelter. Yeah, we left Shelter. It's good. It's long gone. But I mean, like they had a Material Friday night we were residents at. It was like Derek, Mark, Farina, Diz, me, Javon, Josh Werner, Scott Song. So pretty solid crew. Heather, DJ Heather. So yeah, I think it probably saw Hiroco at, sheesh, I don't even know. Maybe at Spy Bar, probably a Spy Bar, maybe Smart Bar. Yeah, Hiroko's been always very diverse, from what I known her. I knew her. I knew a lot of the crew she was down with that were all the junglists, too. So
the thing about Chicago is it's surprisingly small. Where if you are a DJ, we all probably hang out. It's one of those cities that like all the crew that came up through the rave scene in the late 90s, early 2000s, we've all pretty much stayed connected because we're all still doing the same thing. So
yeah.
And Hiroco, like, did you ever? I really admire the fact that Hiroco Yamamura is your real name.
Yes.
Right. You kept your real name as your artist name. Like
it's funny.
I admire you for doing that. Like, did you ever feel the pressure to come up with some sort of a moniker like Submerge or?
I used to have a moniker. It's funny. So I used to go by a couple different names. One of them was Bio Booster back in the day, because it's kind of like a copy of Hyperactive in a weird way. But you'd have to explain it every time, right? So people are like, "What did they just say?" And then
didn't want to talk to people and explain your
right. And then after I kind of came back into music, I thought you know, why not use my name? And it's long and annoying, and it messes up flyers when people have to write my whole name out. So,
what's the worst pronunciation you've had of your name that someone told you?
I was actually in high school. Some teacher was like Hiroshima, and like everyone's like, "Oh man."
Slew that one. Jesus.
It's pretty phonetic, right? Like I feel like my name's, you know.
That's the thing. Like people would butcher my last name in school and still do to this day. And like it's pretty fucking phonetic. It's like how can you fuck it up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ask Hyperactive's last name. What's your last name, Jojo?
Manu Maliuna.
Is it?
Manu Maliuna. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
I still can't say it, man, until today.
It took me a while, but I could say it now. But like, what's the worst version you've heard of your last name?
Of mine?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Can you remember?
You know, they always think that it's Uena. Malu. They say Manu Maluena. They always say. Oh, but I've heard the craziest stuff, man. I can't even remember how many times it's been fucked up.
That's what's great when you get those like telemarketers and they call, they always pause for like a minute before they ask for you because they're like, "Can I speak to?" And you're like, "All right."
Cut them off. Yeah, that's me. Joseph. They just say Joseph.
Joseph.
But if I
like even you, Joe, when you did a mixtape where it just said Joe Manu, was that on purpose?
Yeah, just messing with. Yeah, it was a little period of using an alias.
How many aliases have you had, Joe?
Samoan Acid Stomper.
That's always my favorite one, the Samoan Acid Stomper.
We used Sync. Me and Woody used Sync for a while.
Oh yay, Woody!
And Dramatic was another one on Smile. That thing I did, 10-inch.
Smile Recordings.
Yeah, Smile New York. Remember?
I remember that label. I didn't know you did a record with them.
Yeah, it was a kind of a electro jam.
Was it a typical like the 10-inch ones with colored vinyl?
The clear ones.
It was a gray 10-inch. Yeah.
I think I have that.
I gotta find that shit.
I have that record.
Yeah, it's called.
Was it a flexi disc?
No, it was solid. Yeah. I'm trying to think of who ran it back then. He played at a show in Chicago, and we were talking. He's like, "Yeah, send some stuff." And then we did that. There was a track called Tilt and Big Space Funk. Tilt was the one that.
Oh, dude, I remember that Tilt. Right, it was an orange record.
Wasn't like Charles Feelgood in charge of things then? Was it some of those?
No, it was a New York guy. Thought he was a jungle DJ.
They did release a lot of drum and bass records on Smile.
But the famous Smile record was Armand Van Helden, the remix, the Search.
The Search, and also Mr. Kirk, Your Son Is Dead, as well, by 4 Hero.
Oh, that's a great record. Yeah. That was a re-release, though. I think it was on
was it?
Something else before that. Yeah.
So we were talking, been tearing it up on this audio transmission here.
What?
You guys been tearing it up? Like what's been the big talk here going on? Well,
we're bouncing around different topics, but we were talking like I'm trying to press this triple pack on my label, and I'm getting like 4-month turnaround times, and I'm like, and I asked the guys in a group WhatsApp, I'm like, is it taking you with the pressing plants that you're working, is it really taking that long to press something? And I had a thought, like, why not just do flexi discs? I'm sure the turnaround time is a few days, right? Versus.
But is there a certain amount is it like an acetate where you can only play it so many times, or is it just?
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, they do burn down. You can't cut them very deep either.
Okay.
But they're cool.
They make good promos. Flexi.
Well, Joachim actually cuts on those plastic discs.
Yeah, he's got his own lathe.
He's got a lathe, and you can cut on them, and they don't have a limited amount of plays, and apparently they sound fairly decent.
Really?
You could do like 5 or 6 or 10 minimum.
I mean, all my old acetates from the 90s still play fine. So I don't believe in that myth that, you know, there are certain sections that like don't sound as good, like all the high end is gone, but generally speaking, you could play them and
you get this
nobody
big
would know that.
wispy wash at a certain point.
And the needle just skips across.
You still got them have you got them in Barcelona, your record collection, or where is it?
It's in my mom's house.
Nice.
So whenever I'm in my mom's house and I disappear into the attic, I don't come out for hours. It's once I start like going through a bin, I'm gone.
Where are you from originally? You're from Baltimore, Maryland? I thought you're from Maryland or
DC.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
I see Alan Oldham just joined in on the chat.
On
YouTube. He says, how the hell did JoJo bust into this?
T1000. I can't go anywhere without Joe.
Roped in.
Yeah. I'm not allowed to go out without Joe because he's got to like throw me in a cab at some point and tell me I'm being inappropriate and make me go home.
Remember the last time we hung out, Hiroco, you took me to that goth club that was like membership only.
Oh, really?
That's a secret night.
Get the note.
Oh, shit.
Say that again?
In LA?
No, it was in Chicago when I was in Chicago. Like,
no, there's one in LA.
That was the same party, same event, just a Chicago branch.
What is it
Cloak
called?
and Dagger.
Cloak and Dagger, yeah.
Yes,
They did it in Chicago.
I got a membership card.
They
made David flip his shirt inside out and put tape on his shoes.
Isn't it the dude from She Wants Revenge who runs that?
Yeah, Adam 12.
Yeah, that's it.
My shoes had a little bit of white on them, and my shirt had like a logo here.
Yeah,
like,
forget it.
Flip your
You're not
shirt.
getting in.
I literally outside. I took my shirt off and flipped it inside out. And
I got pictures of him changing.
I put black tape around my shoes to go inside. I was like, "This is
not enough black."
Hiroco, when you play Spy Bar, how free do you feel to play sort of, you know, more on the banging techno tip? Or
I mean, most of the time I'd say if I am opening up for somebody, it's you just have to play appropriate, right? Nobody at 10 p.m. wants to hear like a banging set. I think it's important to understand. I don't want to hear a banging set at 10 p.m. So I think it's important to also understand who the headliner is that night and set them up correctly. And you always stay within what is true to your music, but it's also like you don't want to wear the energy out, you know, right before the headliner goes on. But it's important still to play a good set within kind of the context of when you're playing. So for me, programming is really important. So
yeah, you hear that, kids?
It's a real art, isn't it? The whole warm-up DJ thing. It's you know,
it's a hard thing to learn because, like, I think in Chicago, especially, you when you come from the rave background, and when we were playing raves, it was like you just go as hard as you can for an hour, right? And that was the environment. So switching from that into a club where I think there's also this notion that like playing an opening set doesn't have energy, or you're like holding back. And I don't think that's true, right? It's just about context. So there can be a lot of energy and it can be a really dance floor intensive set, but you really want to think about the energy of the night and how it's going and what kind of music the headliner is going to be playing next. And it's not that you're not conceding or anything to them. You're thinking about how you're going to sound weird running up against something that's going to, not work correctly or whatever. So it took a while to understand that and not feel like there was this idea that I was compromising, right? And I think people think that if I play differently than I played during a headlining set, then I'm compromising. And I think that's not true. I think you like all of that music and it's all diverse. And playing at 1 o'clock, playing at 2 o'clock, playing at 3 o'clock. It's just going to be different. And if you walk in there at 10 p.m. and the club is slamming and everyone is having a great time, that opening set's going to be way different than the opening set where it's you and your 5 friends telling you you're doing a good job and like nodding to you or like laughing at you when you mess up your mixes, you know?
Hey, Joe, remember that one time we played in Phoenix at the after party and we did a back-to-back and the guy before us was playing hardcore?
Yeah.
And we did like a deep house set.
What the hell?
How was that transition?
Wow.
Super, but it was weird. It was weird, but the crowd was totally like up for it.
That's great.
But it felt like a real, man, I don't want to use like a cliche saying, but it felt real underground when we got there because super hard to get to, hard to walk down these tracks. We got in there and the guy was probably just slamming 150. I was like, you sure he wants to play house, man? Like, what this guy's like, this is not a good transition, you know.
Was this one of Robert's parties?
It wasn't. I don't know if was he involved with it, the after party though.
Yeah, well, he hooked it up, but yeah, he was part of it.
Yeah,
but man, they didn't leave. They didn't care what was playing. So all right,
I think that's what it was.
We didn't clear the floor.
It was like this warehouse, like outside of the city of Phoenix, and just
like a proper rave.
Yeah, and it was packed.
Like it was like those Carroll Street lofts.
Oh, jeez.
Where it's like an art installation, like a living quarters. It was just kind of all over the place. Yeah.
I think part of that is like you kind of have to trust the person programming that night, right? They have an idea and a vision of what they want to have happen, and they're putting those pieces together, right? So they're booking you for a particular reason for that spot, and just because you are opening doesn't mean that you're not a big part of that picture.
I think the opening is the most important part because you're setting the tone for the entire night.
Yeah.
The setup, you know, that's my favorite part of the night. It's not the peak time. Anyone can do the peak time. It's how you build from when the doors first open to that moment where you hand off. That's the most exciting.
But don't you think when like most of the time I'd say a club would book an opening DJ as like a not a very experienced, or it would be a younger DJ, and they're mostly just excited to play the gig, so they want to like bring out their best bangers, and they're just like, I don't care about opening up the night and creating this build up of a vibe. They just want to just go for it.
That's a good way to not get booked again.
I mean,
I've done it.
Yeah.
I mean, in Italy, I mean, the go-to thing used to be just have a CD on when the club opens. So you don't, and then you wait. Yeah, you wait till they just put like a CD until the club fills up.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
The DJ starts, because that was the whole vibe. And
we don't mind playing early.
But you guys like to play open to close as often as you can at the right clubs, like so that
that's a long time to be standing. Right? For me, that's a long time to be standing, and like
it's not in the States though. It's not like Europe. It's not like you're going to be standing for like 13 hours.
Yeah,
I've done that before.
I think it's great, but it's exhausting, right? There's like playing open to close and having a storied set that you're still creative with, I think that's where a lot of art comes in, right? I think you really have to plan, and like those are the nights that I'm gonna actually have a drink, and then I'm looking at my playlist and I'm like, did I play that track already? And my USBs are always a mess, so I never know.
It could be a fun experience. That's for sure.
Those opening sets at like Spy Bar are like 10 to 1.
Yeah,
it gets moving.
Yeah.
10 to 11's like sound check, an hour-long sound check.
Yeah, you're just making eye contact with the bartenders, being like, is everything all right?
Another round.
I did 26 and a half hours at Sunwaves, and that was
26. How many bathroom breaks did you have to take?
You go to the bathroom. There's a porta potty behind the stage.
I had porta potty just for you.
I had no. It was it was public one.
Crowd surf your way through to the toilets.
It's pretty basic and rustic there. And then I had friends that like said goodbye, and they went and slept 8 hours, took a shower, and came right back, and were fresh. They smelled fresh, and I'm still
different shirts on.
What did you do after that set? Did you just crash, or did you keep going?
I was okay. I tried to eat, and my body just rejected everything.
Oh man!
I was gonna say, did you eat during your set or like snack?
No, they brought me. I had them. It took me a few years to work up to 26. Like it started with this friendly rivalry between me and Marco Carolla, and it started, I think, at 12 hours, and then 14, 16, 18.
Who's got the record though? Marco?
I mean, it turned into a pissing con. It's like so dumb.
I think hasn't Richie got the record? For,
it was
there, right? He was trying to do 99 hours, wasn't he?
99 hours.
99.
Yeah.
Something I like to sleep way too much.
My feet would fall off pretty much. That would be.
It's definitely fun. Because I would start Sunday afternoon, and so it was still light out, and I would have to play like kind of a sunset set, and then you're then you have to like kind of as if you're starting the night. You got to keep it deep, and you really have to control how to pace everything, like tempo and what you play. When obviously,
and the drugs.
When you have that much time to work with, it's like
drugs.
The drugs, yeah, of course.
Hi, drugs.
Nothing but vitamin waters.
I mean, Ali, the food in Mamaia, where in Romania is, you can't eat there anyway.
I mean, the food in Romania is pretty. Like Romania is
not there though.
Is one of the most inspiring places in the world for music, right? But for food, they need some help, right?
Yeah.
But the best food for anybody listening that I've ever found in Romania, anywhere in Romania, is actually at Sunwaves. There's like these food trucks, and there's one barbecue food truck that is better than any restaurant or hotel dining experience. So that's my tip for food.
Kebabs.
Yeah.
Romania's food scene's growing exponentially by the day.
I've never been.
You keeping tabs on it, Hiroco?
Yeah, they're not concerned with food in Romania.
Yeah, I feel like every time I go, there's a new restaurant, and there's a ramen place now in Bucharest, and the food scene's growing there. It's pretty great.
There you go. That's all you need is a ramen spot.
I like other food too.
Did they don't like sushi and ramen?
Rice.
But do the Romanians like add the Romanian, I don't know, kind of twist to the ramen? Or
Romanian, especially in like Bucharest, there's just so much Italian food, right? It's heavily Italian influence. So it's sometimes hard to find actual like Romanian food.
Yeah.
What is Romanian?
Bucharest last month.
Do they speak do they understand Italian?
A lot of people speak Italian there.
Yeah.
I think, Ali, you have to explain the situation with Sunwaves where it is, because it's not near anywhere. It's like 3 hours from Bucharest. It's very provincial.
It's like the country.
Yeah. Is it like the Burning Man?
You're in the middle of nowhere.
It's like it's where they all go on holiday. It's along the Black Sea coast. It's kind of the holiday destination for Romanians. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun times.
The Black Sea.
Is the
Hiroco? Wait. Okay, so I feel like you were starting to explain why you took such a long break from music.
Yeah.
And then we got off topic and you didn't fully
I got distracted by Joe's face when I see him. So I had taken a long break. I was just kind of feeling I had achieved everything I wanted to. The last project I did before this was this electro group called Monologic I did with my friend Paul Norman. And we ended up playing Movement that year. And I was like, well, this is as good as it gets, right? So, and music was changing. This is when like Bloghouse was kind of blowing up, like the precursor to EDM. Bloghouse.
Blog.
I never heard of that. Blog.
It was Bloghouse blowing up around the same time Witch House was.
Yeah, somewhere around there. It was like it was basically like MySpace, right? It's where like emo music scene collided with house music. So it was this very like electro scenester kind of thing, and it was younger, and I just kind of felt like I had done everything I wanted to. And so I took a break. My life was kind of in a different place. And then maybe it was 6 or 7 years ago, and I was in Berlin for my friend Brian Franzen's birthday. And I had run into Seth Truxer, Jesse Szymanski, Heartthrob, Miss Kitten, Caroline, just a bunch of people I knew from back in the day. And everybody was kind of like, what happened to you? What are you doing now? It's like, oh, I like fixing computers and playing video games, and I'm just kind of not doing any music. And everyone's like, that's pretty stupid. Like, what are you doing with your time? And so my best friend ended up moving to England. And I was like, well, I really don't have anything to do with my time. I should maybe play with DJing again. Pretty much everybody that I've met that has really dedicated themselves to music has had a pretty good level of success, right? People that have really made the move and tried. And so I was like, I decided to give it another go. My music tastes had changed. And I had the really good opportunity of being friends with people like Joe and Submerge and Seth and all these people who helped me kind of narrow down my sound a little bit, which is still all over the place because I kind of like everything. And it just worked out, at the time, like Chicago before, the underground clubs were really like Smart Bar, right? And Smart Bar had changed the booker at the time, and they were not booking a lot of Chicago artists for a while. And so I was lucky enough to meet people like Dino and John Curley and Lawrence over at Soundbar, and they decided to give me a chance. And so it ended up working out, and then interest started picking up overseas. And so, yeah, now I don't know what else to do with my time. So I was really lucky. I think it's rare to get an opportunity that you have so many peers that believe in you and kind of say are encouraging what you're doing and think that constantly are telling you that you should be doing this thing. So I really lucked out having the friend circle that I do, and David and Mo, and everybody has just been really supportive, and that's really not common, right? There's always somebody who's kind of like, you should maybe think things out a little bit more. But right place, right time, really encouraging friends, really nice people, really generous people who are willing to take a chance on you, and things just kind of lined up.
And so you sort of pushed the pause button on your own career for a period of time, and now the pause button has been kind of forced upon us by this pandemic. So how have you adjusted to
Gosh,
this?
Yeah, I don't think I have. It's I think I talked to these guys about it a lot. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was seeing all these people be productive and doing all these amazing things, and I was just kind of frozen for a while, right? My social outlet was gone. My reason for making music was lessened, right? So I was making these tracks that, labels didn't necessarily feel like investing PR in, or, 10 people are going to purchase because what's the reasoning? And so, and then also you're just, the reality of your financials, right? And like, how much can you rely on this? And there's always this moment of like, damn, what was I thinking? Right now, these kinds of things can happen, and everything is on pause. And after a while, you have to kind of realize that everyone is affected like this, right? It's not just you. There's this large period of self-pity and kind of doubts and worrying about the future. And you realize that I don't have it as bad as a lot of other people. And I still have these amazing opportunities that I should really take advantage of. And I still love making music. So you reach back to your core of why you're doing things, right? And my social life is now hanging out at the studio, right? So that is my fun time, and instead of going out. And so I've kind of reconnected with that, whereas it was always kind of this pressure to finish a track or do these mixes. Now this is, instead of going out, I'm going to the studio and taking time with some gear that I was really maybe glossing over before. And but it goes back and forth every day, right? Some days you're like, there's these cool things going on and you're really inspired and you're included in maybe some cool projects. And then the next week there's nothing, right? No one cares. You're like, no one cares anymore. People have forgotten how the hell am I going to pay rent? And, all these various things come up. But if you're going to be doing this still, no matter what, then it doesn't make a difference, right? So if in my free time I'm going to be making music and working on techno, whether or not anyone's releasing it or listening to it, that's the core of it. This is what I do for fun. So nobody really knows when things are going to come back or what things are going to look like. And you really have no control of that. And so accepting that, like, all you can do is manage what you can in your own environment, and the world and the business and people's opinion or interests, it's totally out of your control, right? You've got no say in that stuff. So you just kind of accepting that.
Yeah.
So like during these times, how inspirational has the McRib been?
McRib, you know what? So the McRib
inspired you to write some more music?
Absolutely. Listen, when things are tough for me, I like to have little like landmarks to look forward to, no matter how small they are.
Comfort.
And McRib is definitely one of those things. It's this thing that comes only once a year in the Midwest, and it's actually, my opinion of the McRib is, if you eat meat, like if you dine on flesh, there's the rest of the animal that gets left every time. McRib is your annual eating of the rest of the animal, right? Like the ass, the eyes. They throw that all in
compliments to the McRib.
It's like you gotta do your part.
Do your part.
Do your
the rest
part.
Of that animal,
eat the rest of the. Don't be wasting that shit, man.
Don't waste that.
Hiroco, do you eat meat, right?
I do eat meat. Yeah, I eat terribly all the time.
I thought the McRib was only released every so many years. I don't know. It was every year.
It depends. Regional, actually. So some areas get it. Chicago gets it every year.
Did you know Germany, they have it year round?
That's not true.
It's not.
It's actually, it's funny. Somebody tried to get me to move to Berlin because of that. I was like, at the time, I was like, oh, maybe I should move to Berlin. And was like, yeah, they have McRib here all the time. So of course I researched it and all the ramen and sushi restaurants. And that is not true. There's not McRib all year in Berlin.
I don't think anybody should be going out to McDonald's and having McRib. If you want a McRib, make your own McRib at home. Make your own hamburgers at home.
If you do that, though, you're eating like good quality parts.
Exactly. Right? Yeah.
You have to take the waste of humanity, throw it in a formed patty, put some ketchupy barbecue sauce on it, and it's like it's like having zero carbon emissions, right? You're doing your part to
it's kind of like following the Native American way of not wasting any part of the animal.
Absolutely.
It's disrespectful, man. You got to eat the garbage.
The karma.
Great. I just had one like 2 weeks ago.
Don't you downplay the McRib.
I had to load it up with onions and stuff. It was all right.
I've never had one.
David, when's the last time you had a McRib?
Honestly, over 10 years ago.
Come on, guy. Wow.
Listen, I've never tried it. Never once in my life.
David doesn't eat menudo either, though.
Listen, there's good food. There is fine dining. We've all eaten at some of the best restaurants in the world. But there's a flip side of this, right? And that is McRib.
McRib. So you're a fan of the Mc? Okay, I guess I need to try it.
I've never seen anyone so excited about a McRib than Hiroco.
If I'm gonna cut any portion of my life off by wasting my time eating fast food, it's gonna be Long John Silver's for me.
Long John Silver's. That's pretty good too. That's also on that spectrum. Like
the fish plank.
Fish plank is amazing.
Boat paddle of deep fried fish.
No, and what's nice is they actually use haddock still at Long John Silver.
What a wealth of knowledge we have of this
fast food. That's definitely an American thing.
Dude, I'm getting so excited. You know what it is? Growing up, I really didn't get to eat fast food. So when you eat like fish balls or rice balls for lunch and your friends have this like cool Western food, it's like I idolized it. I was like, "Ooh, everyone gets to eat McDonald's and do all this stuff." So,
I think I'm the same way about pork because my mom was Muslim growing up, so we never had pork in the house. And it wasn't until I was like 19, I went to a friend's house and they made a pork chop, and it was the first time I had it.
You turned 19, grabbed a porno mag, a lotto ticket, and some pork,
and a fucking pork chop.
Hey, Hiroco,
this is incredible.
But growing up, like, were you eating like good Japanese food or?
Yeah, of course I ate some garbage, right? I'm not the
Japanese food is good. What are you talking about?
There's lots of trashy Japanese food.
That's what I'm saying. What's considered like trash Japanese?
I'm sorry, David. Say that again.
What's considered like trash Japanese food? Is there like a McDonald's version of Japanese food?
Oh yeah, there's
Yoshinoya.
Yeah, Yoshinoya is so bad for you.
But I mean proper Japanese.
I mean, listen, if you've ever had a bowl of tonkotsu ramen, right? It is a bowl of the worst things for you and the planet condensed in a really amazing.
Yeah, and if you let the broth go cold, it just turns into Jello.
Solidifies.
Yeah, amazing.
Oh my God, my Mac's about to go to sleep.
I wanted to ask quickly. I wanted to ask quickly. Like, I mean, are the kids like the 18, 19-year-olds in Chicago? Are they, especially what's been going on with like casual, and the way that he's been appropriating like new remixes? Are they into the sort of like historic part of dance culture in Chicago? I mean, or is it something new happening? What's because I see
kind of a heartbreaking question. Kind of a heartbreaker of a question,
Well, no, I'm just really interested because I see the way that obviously this music, especially with like tracks like the Percolator or whatever, it's been
for the generation listening at that time or DJing or a club goer. It's almost like everything that came after was a distant memory to a lot of the younger generation.
Right.
I think actually kids nowadays, young kids are actually way more informed about music than people give them credit for. I think there is, of course, I'm probably seeing a sliver of that, but the DIY culture in kids now, they're making like the emo rap and bedroom rap, and you're just seeing people that are you're actually seeing some semblance of subculture kind of reemerge, right? If you listen to a lot of these young artists, a lot of them are recycling kind of old ideas, but at the same time, you're seeing small pockets actually grow amongst that. So like there is, the emo scene and the goth scene and the industrial scene, you're seeing that actually start to come back in a weird way, right? And a lot of it's just aesthetic maybe, but with that, you're seeing a lot of actual music knowledge and people being interested in that because you have the internet in front of you, right? You can look up anything and there's a wealth of information in front of you. And I think people don't give young kids enough credit now. I think the kids are really smart. They're just using that information in a different way. But I think
I always look at like the mid-90s Chicago to be like the weirder brother of the Strictly Rhythm. It was like everyone was so focused on like New York, Strictly Rhythm, sort of the wild pitch sound. And then you had the Chicago thing with Dance Mania. But that was always like the outsider scene, especially from a European point of view. It was always like, with Butterfly and all these kind of like, it was always the stranger version, so it was never the commercial side of like dance music.
Things were super DIY. I think each of those labels and groups, everyone was off doing their own thing with their own pocket. And so it just wasn't as organized and kind of a larger kind of commercial product at any point. But I think that's why it's still really exciting to revisit that stuff because it is so kind of DIY and fresh sounding, and you can really hear all those aspects of it, and you can hear the time, right? And kind of you get an idea of what was happening listening to that music versus, I think New York House is great, but it was absolutely a much more polished product, right? Like Junior Sanchez and all those guys were doing amazing stuff, but there was always a much more commercial outlet for them. So the final product had to be slightly more polished than, Dance Mania running 50 different records that week, right? And, everyone using some weird alias. And there was a lot more kind of experimentation in the sound, and you can hear the wrestling of the equipment in a lot of those records. And that's what's really attractive about it.
I remember there was a lot of crossover kind of Chicago artists. Liz Torres, Mr. Lee. Who did Nunu? Was it Liddell Townsend?
Liddell Townsend?
That was a big one on radio. Nunu.
Yeah, that was a big commercial.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
But
that kind of rivaled what was happening,
even on DJ Duke's label and Power Music, all my favorite artists were always the Chicago artists. It was always Felix House Cat. That was for me. That was the thing with that mid-90s sound. They were the guys. They were the guys that were doing it. It wasn't the New York people. It was the Chicago guys. It
was like the record pool days when they were still strong, like Power Music. Yeah. I did some remixes of that stuff.
Nice. Well,
Mickey Mix and Oliver and all those guys, they were kind of involved in this Power Music thing.
Nice.
Crazy times.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to wind down, guys. Hiroko, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
There's a mutual friend of ours that I was talking to earlier, and I asked him, if there's something about you that you can tell me, and he said you care more about keeping it real than being a star. And in my opinion, you're a star for keeping it real.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys having me. It's good to see everybody. I hope everybody stays safe.
Hey, really quick. I'm sorry. I have to ask.
Of course.
What are your thoughts on this Peggy Goo thing?
Ooh.
Why you got to go there?
I'm just curious.
If you were to ask
question, it's a very good question.
If you were to ask my upstairs neighbor what they thought of me, I'd be really surprised if the answer wasn't very similar to what was posted. I think it's let me be careful about this one. I think it's very important to listen. It's important to be nice to people, right? It's important not to make people sad. And except you guys, I'll do whatever I can to pick on you. That being said, it's fine to come out and say, hey, such and such is an asshole, right? Like, but like, are we gonna do this in person where we can like throw hands or something, or are we gonna do this on the internet, right? So if to somebody, I'm sure I'm the worst person in the world, right? There are absolutely times that I've done unspeakable things, right? And I still do make mistakes all the time and say things that I shouldn't, and my temper goes out, and I own my mistakes though, right? And I think people, you put anybody under a magnifying glass, you're going to magnify that, right? But
I mean, I've known Daniel for like maybe 15 years.
Yeah.
Very well. No, and it would take something extreme for him to react in this way.
I think that's totally legit. Like, if
that's the thing, it's not like he's going after someone. Sure. Just for the sake of it, and he's a super cool guy.
I don't know him, so I didn't pick that up either. You know,
He's been affected by this individual in such an extreme way that he felt the need to say it, and I think that's only right. You know, he was pushed to say something. You know,
and I can respect that. I think you can. This is your social media. Post what you're going to post, but you have to like accept that you posted that. But I think if you piss me off that much, we're going to fight before I like post something on the internet about you, right? Like,
that's if you're, yeah. Nobody like, people wouldn't say that to one another. Like if they were in a situation where they were confronting one another, like everybody feels more empowered behind social media, you know.
And I think that's
typing away at home, you know.
This could be how if this is what helps him and helps him communicate, and listen, he's got his own social circles and friends, and maybe that's how he communicates to them. That's just personally not how I would handle that situation, which doesn't invalidate it. I think it's totally, you're going to do what you're going to do. You communicate how you're going to communicate. If something bothers you that much and you're like, you know what, my friends need to know that there's a dangerous situation out there, or this person is whatever. For me, though, that's not what my social media is for, right? My social media is for like,
I have to say,
that's a good point.
You want to see some sad jokes, you know, and like me self-deprecating myself or making fun of.
But you must have seen some, because you're the queen of the memes.
Sure.
Looking up
funny memes, right, about it.
It could be. I don't know Daniel either. It could be very much a generational thing as well. I don't know. It seems like these days people like to air out their garbage on the internet. And
you guys know Peggy Goo?
I do know her, and not well.
Not in person,
but
I don't know her.
I've met her a few times, and you know, my experiences with her were, she's a celebrity, right? And I think when you're a celebrity DJ in a certain space, sometimes you close down in different ways, right? Or your responses to things are different. So I know when I've been rushing out of a situation and I'm with Joe, I'm probably saying really terrible things to him, right? Like, and if somebody would hear the terrible things coming out my mouth to Joe at that moment, they'd be like, wow, this is really
but
canceled.
But is Peggy keeping it real though?
I mean, it sounds kind of real, right? Like, you know, like
who knows?
Maybe if you just don't like people, that's okay, right? Like,
yeah, fuck it.
If you're a fucking asshole, excuse my French, it's okay.
There's a lot of assholes in our industry. I mean, not everyone is going to be nice, you know.
Right. And if like somebody must think she's okay, right? And somebody must, you know, I think the problem I had with that post, and these are minor, you know, there were other things attached to that besides just like, hey, this person's a fucking asshole, you should stay away from them, right? maybe commentaries about the way someone looks or the way they smell, or, you know, maybe the shoes they own, that kind of stuff. Like, dude, you know, what does that have to do with you, you know?
Don't you think?
That being said, maybe that does have some significance with him, you know?
You guys are going to start making me talk about what an asshole Dave Clark is in a second.
I love Dave.
I think the thing that Daniel, the point he was making, of course, he had a very personal sort of relationship.
Sure.
Was that he would hope, and I think, and it's happening, is that more people that have experienced their time with Peggy, whether it's good or bad, are now going to have the courage to speak up in what's become a culture where no one will talk.
Right.
And, you know, it's funny because I saw an RA today. There was like a post they did about some thing that's another, basically a DJ or a producer had ripped off another track, but yet they've still not addressed this thing that Daniel said.
But I think that you can't subtract the individual from that, right? So as a person, if I'm in this situation and someone is rude to me, if I personally allow that in my space, or I'm like, this is okay, I'm making that choice at that time, right? And I'm allowing that to happen. I think I'm worried about these situations that you need other people agreeing with you to kind of make a decision. And I'm sure not everyone is in the situation that they feel confident, but if you're going to take somebody being an asshole to you, no matter who they are, right? Whether they're famous or rich, or maybe they've got better facial hair, or whatever that factor might be, then that's something that you're susceptible to, right? Like, you are someone that accepts someone insulting you or being mean, and you know, sometimes you just don't care, right? You're like, this person was very rude. I'm never going to see them again. It didn't really bother me. So me having an argument with them in a DJ booth isn't going to go anywhere, right?
Sure. But I mean, we live in a culture where she's got, I mean, I'm not saying, well, artists or DJs or whatever,
Sure.
if they, you know, it's this thing is, if they're making a promoter money, then they can do whatever they want. They can have, like, I know from Dave Clark in the 90s or the early 2000s, ridiculous demands, you know, or DJs having ridiculous fucking demands. And like with David Guetta wanting a hotel, all the hotel free, like Tomorrowland's, and then 10,000 euros in cash.
Right.
You know,
but it takes each person.
And the promoter will do that just
Right.
to have these DJs on the bill. But that doesn't mean that they're a nice person, you know?
Right.
They're able to.
Do they deserve to be called out?
Yeah, exactly.
But like, if a promoter is going to give those demands and that money and those things, they obviously think it's a fair trade, right? So if they're like,
they're making money, and that's a problem in this society. Is
absolutely right.
That they could do whatever they want, and I think this is what Daniel's trying to say, is that he had enough. You know, this girl was tormenting her, and he felt sorry for her, and he took her under a wing, did all these things for her, and the backlash was that she was, you know, like an arsehole to him, you know?
Right.
So
like, I would have like put poo in the mailbox or something. I don't know. I'm just like, I guess I'm from like a different school on that stuff, right? And I think maybe he didn't intend for this to become this viral. You know, if you look at like the techno memes group, there's 1,000 memes about this, right? And like, there's 10 people that'll tell you that I'm the worst person they've ever met. I guarantee, right?
What did you do?
Yeah, you know what I did. I
see what you started, David.
Yeah, she should.
I thought it was just going to be this quick answer.
I'll say she should eat a McRib.
There you go. I think it's important for all of us in the dance music community to start realizing that just because we all say we listen to techno or we all listen to dance music, that we are not into the same genres or the same things or have the same ideals or
yeah.
at all. And I don't know anything about Peggy at all. I don't know her music. I don't know. She's not a part of my world by any means. It's just as separate to me as if I listened to Slayer my whole life and now everyone's talking about Paris Hilton.
Yeah. I mean,
it's like a completely different world to me. And
people are upset when like Paris Hilton started DJing, right? And they're like, what does that have to do with what you're doing, right? It's as like relevant as like the Kentucky Fried Chicken EDM set, right? Like there's no relation. There just happen to be turntables there. That does not make that equivocant in any way to what anyone else is doing, you know?
Yeah, just because you have a guitar doesn't mean we play the same type of rock music as well. I mean, I don't know. It just it's a completely different world.
If you go back to the 1920s, I mean, I think we just need to turn our eyes off, and if you just listen to the music and enjoy music, you know, not have all these things around you, you know, that say you need to like this for this person, she's this, he's that, and then just enjoy.
Yeah, but I think we're all guilty of that, right? You look at your favorite like actor or actress, right? And there's all these like fantasies around their life and their personality based on their performances as an actor or an actress. And like,
yeah, but Hiroco, you know, when you were growing up, like with me, like Thrasher magazine, or if you were into dance music, the romanticism of the culture was half the thing, because you didn't have the internet to. You were like, wow, who are these people? What are these? You know, and now it's like it's shoved down your throat. Like, he's this, she's this, blah, 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 you know, and that's.
But I think everybody can look at a Instagram post by somebody and say some thought went into this, right? There's X amount of followers, there's X amount of PR and agents, and this artist paycheck is playing 20 people, not one person. So this is I don't want to say it's a product, but there's more at risk for every choice. So that, you know, my Instagram, who cares, right? It's a mess. Someone like a celebrity who's really popular, yeah, there's probably a little bit more thought that goes into that because it's curated. There's consequences, right? Like, so it's like Mo said, it's this different world that I don't know how it works. And I think you post whatever you want on the internet, really. If you feel bad, if you feel great, if you feel like posting that, you should. But I think I think it's dangerous to need your ideas to be supported by other people, to feel validated about them. I think if your ideas are your ideas, then go for it, right? Yeah. And just, you know, maybe they should box, you know? I think that would be we'll set this up and make some money. You know?
That would be a good pay-per-view.
Is that like a very American way of looking at things? Like just fucking duke it out.
I mean, listen, I throw hands over dumb things, right? Like, you know, I've got a terrible McRib. You mess up my McRib and you put extra onions on it, I will.
She's a ramen snob.
Wow.
Dave, are you happy with the responses to your question?
Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
You feel like we've answered?
You know, I like to throw a curveball every once in a while.
I like David's and Ali's shirt. I like those.
There, he's got Ali's got the old school ministry shirt.
Yeah, that's well regarded in these neck of the woods, Ali.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. We got to have Hyper back on the show sometime. You got a wealth of knowledge at Chicago.
Wait. What is that hat behind you, Joe? What is that?
It's my lamp. It's a lampshade. It's a lampshade.
Oh, yeah, is that what that is?
It's a lampshade.
Okay, so Joe and I played a back-to-back one year, and he wore that next to me. And I tried to explain how inappropriate. I thought that was his rice hat. Anyway.
So pissed. I told her I would wear a 4-foot rice hat, and she was like, "I'll fucking kill you if you wear that." So.
All right, we should probably end the show.
Wrap this up.
Wrap it up, B.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, wrap it up.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Dude, thanks for coming.
Back on the show. We need more. We need more of this.
Yeah, Jojo.
Happy birthday, Chris.
Don't worry, we're gonna have a lot of fun the next one too.
I guess I'll see you guys at the poker table this week.
Poker tonight.
Oh,
We'll have
poker game tonight. All right.
We'll have Hyperactive on, and would be cool to hear his history. He's got a lot of history.
Yeah, we got to talk about Daft Punk.
So
and for those people who don't know, he was in a Daft Punk music video. So that's that'll be interesting to talk about.
Famous Hyperactive.
Famous Hyperactive
with its snowflake backgrounds. All right.
All right, guys. Cheers.
All right, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Guys, be safe.
Bye.